2 years had passed since the Eternal Horizon crisis. The Coalition Human Engineering Academy occupied an entire orbital platform above Earth, visible from the planet's surface as a bright star in the evening sky. Inside its halls, students from 40 species learned to think in ways their ancestors never imagined. Director Day Wan walked through the training workshops, his gray hair now fully white. He moved between stations where Valkyrian students practiced with simple hand tools, where Morthani apprentices learned to solder by hand, where Zephyrin engineers built circuits without computer assistance. "Listen to the machine," he told a mixed group gathered around a disabled power unit. "Do not just look at the readings. Touch it, feel the vibration, smell the air. Your senses can tell you things that instruments miss." A young Morthani raised one of his 4 hands. "But Director, our instruments are more accurate than biological senses. Why should we trust feeling over measurement?" Daewon smiled. He had heard this question many times. Instruments tell you what they are designed to measure, but problems are not always where you expect them. Your senses can detect patterns that instruments are not programmed to find. Use both, trust both. The student looked skeptical but nodded. Daewon remembered his own skepticism when he was young, before experience taught him that knowledge came from many sources. In another workshop, Kextal taught a class on adaptive engineering. The Valkyrian had spent 18 months studying on Earth, learning methods that had seemed impossible at first. Now Kextal was one of the Academy's most popular instructors, teaching with a mix of Valkyrian logic and human practicality. "The key is accepting uncertainty," Kextal explained to the class. "In traditional Valkyrian engineering, we calculate every possibility before acting. But sometimes you do not have time for calculations. Sometimes you must make the best guess and adapt as you learn." A Valkyrian student in the front row looked troubled. "Teacher Kextal, that approach seems to contradict our cultural values. Are we abandoning Valkyrian methods?" "Not abandoning," Kextal replied. "Expanding. Valkyrian precision is valuable, but human adaptability is equally valuable. The strongest engineers use both. They calculate when there is time and improvise when there is not." Across the galaxy, the changes were becoming visible. New coalition vessels rolled out of shipyards with hybrid designs. They had cutting-edge quantum processors but also simple mechanical backups. They had automated systems but also manual overrides that anyone could operate. They were less elegant than older designs but far more reliable. These ships earned a new classification: human reliable. The term had started as a joke among traditional engineers, but it quickly became a mark of quality. Vessels certified as human reliable commanded higher prices and attracted the best crews. They were preferred for exploration missions, long-distance travel, and any assignment where help would not arrive quickly if something went wrong. The Eternal Horizon remained the most famous example. Captain Harin had commanded the Flagship through dozens of successful missions, each one proving that the hybrid approach worked. The ship had experienced problems. What ship did not? But nothing catastrophic. Every time something failed, the backup systems kept everything running while repairs were made. Bomi stood on the Flagship's bridge, reviewing reports from the latest voyage. As Chief of Resilience Engineering, she had spent 2 years refining the systems, training crew members, and documenting everything for other ships to learn from. Her grandfather's toolkit sat in a display case near the captain's chair, a reminder of where this journey had started. "Chief Bomi, we have received a distress call," the communications officer reported. "A Zephyrin science vessel, the Crystal Mind, has experienced catastrophic systems failure. They are requesting immediate assistance." Harin looked at the location data. "We can reach them in 8 hours. How long do they have?" "Unknown, Captain." Their message was fragmentary. Bomi checked the ship's status. "All systems green." "Captain, we are ready to respond." "Set course," Harin ordered. "Maximum safe speed." The Eternal Horizon arrived at the Crystal Mind's location to find the science vessel drifting, dark, and silent. Bomi led a repair team across, bringing tools both advanced and simple. What they found was eerily familiar. A ship with perfect technology that had failed in Cascade because the systems could not adapt to unexpected stress. But this time, the repairs went quickly. Bomi and her team, humans, Valkyrians, Morthani, and others, worked together using the methods that had saved the Eternal Horizon. They created manual overrides, installed simple backups, and isolated systems to prevent cascade failures. Within 12 hours, the crystal mind was functional again. The Zephyrin captain, their crystalline body pulsing with grateful blue light, approached Bomi. "You saved us. But I must know, how did you learn to repair so quickly? We have been drifting for 2 days. Our own engineers could not solve the problem." "We learned from experience," Bomi replied. "This ship faced the same kind of failure. We know what to look for now, and we know how to fix it." "I have heard of the Eternal Horizon incident," the Zephyrin captain said. "We thought it was unique." "Are you saying this could happen to any ship?" "To any ship built the old way," Bomi confirmed. "Sophisticated systems are wonderful when everything works perfectly. But space is not perfect. You need systems that can handle imperfection." The crystal mind returned to its home station, flying beside the Eternal Horizon. Word of the rescue spread quickly. Another ship saved by human engineering methods. Another example of why resilience mattered as much as sophistication. Back at the Academy, Daewon received a message from Admiral Thex Corian. The Morthani military was commissioning a new class of warships, and they wanted the designs reviewed by human engineers before construction began. It was a remarkable request. The military was the most traditional part of the coalition, the last to accept change. "Even the warriors are learning," Daewon said to Kextal as they reviewed the warship plans together. "They understand now that the strongest weapon is one that keeps fighting even when damaged." Kextal traced glowing fingers over the holographic design. "These ships will be formidable. But Director, I worry about something. What if we go too far? What if we focus so much on reliability that we stop advancing?" "That is a good question," Daewon replied. "And the answer is balance. We do not stop advancing. We just make sure that advancement includes reliability from the start, not added as an afterthought. The best engineering uses all available knowledge, old and new together." The Academy graduated its first class 6 months later. 300 engineers from 20 species, all trained in hybrid methods. They spread across the coalition, joining shipyards, research stations, military bases, and exploration vessels. Each one carried the knowledge that technology served life, not the other way around. At the graduation ceremony, Bomi gave a speech that was broadcast across coalition space. She stood at the podium wearing the Star of Service medal, her grandfather's toolkit visible on a table beside her. 2 years ago, the Eternal Horizon nearly died, she began. 3,000 people came within hours of death because we believed that advanced always means better. We learned that lesson at great cost. But we did learn it. She held up one of the old wrenches from the toolkit. This tool is 300 years old. It is not sophisticated. It cannot interface with computers or adjust itself automatically. But it works today exactly as it did 3 centuries ago. That is a different kind of excellence. The graduates sitting before you have learned to appreciate both kinds of excellence. They can design quantum processors and also fix broken pipes. They can write complex software and also wire circuits by hand. They understand that the universe does not care about our categories of primitive and advanced. It only cares about what functions when needed. The audience, filled with representatives from every coalition species, listened in respectful silence. "We often ask what makes humans special in the coalition," Bomi continued. "The answer is not that we are smarter or stronger than other species. The answer is that humans spent a long time being weak. We explored space in fragile ships with primitive technology. We survived not through superiority, but through stubbornness and creativity. We learned to make things work because we had no choice. That knowledge is our gift to the coalition, not because human methods are better, but because they are different, and in difference there is strength. The strongest structures use many materials. The strongest teams include many perspectives. The strongest coalition values wisdom from all its members, regardless of how advanced their species may seem." The applause that followed was thunderous, a sound made by 300 different species expressing approval in their own ways. After the ceremony, Daewon found Bomi looking out at the stars through a large window. Earth hung below them, blue and beautiful. "Your grandfather would be very proud," Daewon said quietly. Bomi smiled. "I hope so. He always said that the best engineers are the ones who remember that people depend on their work, not just today but when things go wrong." "That lesson has spread far beyond anything we imagined," Daewon observed. "Human reliable is not just a certification now. It is a philosophy." The Eternal Horizon arrived at Coalition Station Meridian 3 days after the crisis began. News of what happened had traveled ahead of them. Hundreds of ships waited at the station, their crews watching as the famous Flagship approached with unusual slowness. From the outside, the ship looked normal, but those with sensitive instruments could detect the irregular power fluctuations, the slightly uneven thrust from the engines, the signs that something fundamental had changed. As soon as the docking was complete, Coalition engineers swarmed aboard. They needed to understand what had failed so catastrophically and how it had been repaired. What they found shocked them. In the engineering bay, thick cables ran where elegant data streams had existed. Manual switches replaced automated controls. Simple analog meters sat alongside quantum processors. The most advanced ship in Coalition space had been transformed into something that looked ancient and modern at the same time. The lead inspector, a Valkyrian master engineer named Telvax, examined the modifications with disbelief. This violates every certification standard we have. Who authorized these changes? Commander Harin stood straight, prepared for criticism. I authorized them. The humans identified an integration failure that our experts could not solve. Their method saved 3,000 lives. Telvax touched a hand-soldered connection, his silver fingers trembling slightly. These methods are primitive. This should not work. But it does work, Harin replied firmly. That is what matters. Over the next week, investigators interviewed every engineer who had witnessed the repairs. They studied the humans' methods. They tested the modified systems. Their official report sent shockwaves through the Coalition. The Eternal Horizon had not failed because of poor design or construction. It had failed because it was too perfect. Every system was optimized for ideal conditions. When faced with unexpected stress, the systems had no tolerance for imperfection. They had cascaded into failure because they could not adapt. The human repairs worked because they accepted imperfection. They created systems that could function in less than ideal conditions. They built in redundancies and margins for error. They made the ship rougher but infinitely more resilient. Admiral Thexkorian presented himself before the Coalition High Council. The meeting was held in the Great Assembly Chamber where representatives from every member species gathered. The Admiral's forearms were clasped behind his back as he faced the Council's judgment. Admiral, your flagship nearly died, Council Speaker Vex Terran said. Yet your report recommends we change our entire engineering philosophy based on this failure. Not change entirely, Thexkorian replied. Expand. We have pursued advanced technology brilliantly, but we have forgotten the wisdom of reliable technology. Humans remember both. We should learn from them. A Zephyrin Council member glowed orange with skepticism. You want us to make our vessels less sophisticated? I want us to make them more survivable, Thexkorian corrected. Sophistication means nothing if a ship cannot handle the unexpected. The humans showed us that true engineering excellence includes planning for when things go wrong. Commander Harin stepped forward. Council members, I was skeptical of human methods at first, but I watched them save lives through knowledge we had dismissed as obsolete. I recommend we establish a program to integrate human engineering principles into Coalition standards. The Council debated for hours. Some members argued that accepting human methods was an admission of Coalition inferiority. Others saw it as a necessary evolution. Finally, they reached a decision. The Coalition would create the Human Integration Initiative. Human engineers would be invited to teach at Coalition academies. New vessel designs would incorporate both advanced technology and reliable backup systems. The goal was not to replace Coalition sophistication, but to balance it with human resilience. Daewon received the news in his quarters aboard the station. A formal message invited him to become director of the new Coalition Human Engineering Academy. He read it 3 times, not quite believing it. Bomi found him staring at the message. Captain, are you well? They want me to teach, he said quietly. Me, a shipyard worker who barely finished school. You are more than that, Bomi said. You are someone who saved 3,000 lives. Someone who sees solutions when experts see only problems. That is worth more than any formal education. Daewon looked at his rough hands scarred from decades of repair work. I always thought being human meant being second class in the Coalition. Useful but not important. We are important, Bomi replied. We just needed the chance to prove it. The formal ceremony took place 1 month later. The Coalition High Council presented Daewon and Bomi with the Star of Service, the highest civilian honor in Coalition space. It was the first time humans had received this award. Admiral Thex Corian placed the medal around Daiwan's neck personally. "Captain, I owe you an apology and my gratitude. You taught me that wisdom comes in many forms. I will not forget that lesson." "No apology needed, Admiral," Daiwan said. "You gave us the chance to show what humans can do. That is all we ever wanted." After the ceremony, Kextal approached Bomi. The young Valkyrian engineer had been given a special assignment to become the first non-human student at Earth's engineering schools. "I am nervous," Kextal admitted. "I will be the only Valkyrian among humans. I do not know if I can learn to think the way you do." Bomi smiled. "You already started learning when you asked to help during the crisis. The hardest part is accepting that you do not need to know everything before you begin. The rest is just practice. Will you teach me?" Kextal asked. "I would be honored," Bomi replied. The Eternal Horizon underwent official repairs at the station, but the Coalition engineers did not remove all the human modifications. After testing showed how effective they were, the decision was made to keep the hybrid system. The Flagship would operate with both cutting-edge technology and reliable backup systems working together. Word spread through the Coalition. The Flagship that had nearly died became famous for a different reason. Crew members requested assignment there specifically because of its unique engineering. It became proof that combining different approaches created something better than either approach alone. Commander Harin was promoted to captain and given permanent command of the Eternal Horizon. Her first official act was to create a new position, Chief of Resilience Engineering. She offered it to Daiwan, but he politely declined. "I am needed at the academy," he explained, "but I recommend Bomi for the position. She has the skills and the vision, and she is young enough to see this work through for decades to come." Bomi accepted with joy and terror in equal measure. At 25, she would be responsible for maintaining the most famous ship in Coalition space. But she had her grandfather's tools and the knowledge passed down through generations of human engineers who learned to make impossible things work. On her first day in the new position, she found a message waiting in her quarters. It was from Telvax, the master engineer who had been so shocked by the human repairs. The message was brief. "I was wrong to call your methods primitive. I see now that they are advanced in ways I did not understand. Would you be willing to teach me? I have much to learn." Bomi smiled and sent back a reply. "Of course. Learning never stops. That is the most important lesson of all." As she walked through the engineering bay, now a strange and beautiful mix of sleek technology and rough reliability, Bomi felt her grandfather's presence. He had taught her that the universe did not care about elegance or sophistication. It only cared about what worked when everything went wrong. Now the entire Coalition was learning that lesson, and it was changing everything. The GCS Eternal Horizon moved through the darkness of space like a floating city. The massive ship stretched nearly 2 kilometers from front to back, its hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. Inside, delegates from 47 different alien species walked the corridors, preparing for the Unity Summit. This meeting would decide the fate of 3 star systems that multiple civilizations claimed as their own. The Flagship represented the best of what the Galactic Coalition could build, technology from dozens of worlds working together as one. Captain Daiwan sat in the engineering bay, checking systems on a datapad. He was human, which made him unusual on a ship this important. Most crew members were from older, more respected species. Daiwan had spent 30 years fixing ships in Earth's orbital yards before the Coalition gave him this posting. He was good at his job, even if others did not always see it. His gray hair and weathered hands showed his experience, but many alien crew members still treated him like he did not belong. Next to him, Engineer Bomi cleaned tools with careful attention. She was young for this kind of work, barely 25 Earth years old. Her hands moved quickly, but her eyes showed constant worry. She carried an old toolkit that had belonged to her grandfather, simple tools that looked ancient compared to the advanced equipment around them. The other engineers sometimes laughed at her for keeping such primitive items. The ship's commander, Harin, entered the engineering bay. She was Valkyrian, tall and thin with silver skin that reflected light like metal. Her people were known for their logical minds and strict rules. She looked at Daiwan with the expression she always wore around humans, a mixture of doubt and careful politeness. Captain Daewon, all systems show normal operation, Harin said. Her voice was cool and precise. We will reach the Unity Summit Station in 18 hours. Daewon nodded without looking up from his work. Good. But I want to check the integration protocols one more time. Something feels off. Harin's silver face showed no emotion, but her tone became sharper. The diagnostic systems show no problems. We cannot delay the schedule based on feelings. Before Daewon could respond, the lights flickered. For just a moment, the steady glow of the engineering bay dimmed and then returned. Everyone stopped working. That was strange, Bomi whispered. Harin checked her wrist device. I am getting no error reports. It must have been a minor fluctuation. Then the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed throughout the ship. Every screen in the engineering bay turned the color of warning. Daewon jumped to his feet, his datapad showing system after system going offline. First, the environmental controls began failing. The temperature sensors showed wild swings. Then the propulsion systems shut down completely. The great engines that pushed the massive ship through space went silent. What is happening? Harin's voice lost its calm tone for the first time. Daewon ran to the main control panel. His fingers moved across the interface, trying to understand what he was seeing. Everything is failing. Backup systems are trying to activate, but they are shutting down too. Throughout the ship, panic began to spread. In the diplomatic quarters, delegates who had been preparing speeches and reviewing documents now rushed to their communication devices. Some species could only survive in specific temperature ranges. Others needed particular oxygen levels. The ship's life support was failing, and with it the lives of everyone aboard were at risk. Admiral Thexkorian arrived in the engineering bay within minutes. He was Morthani, a species of towering beings with thick armored skin and forearms. His people had built the core systems of the Eternal Horizon. Pride showed in every movement as he pushed past the human engineers. Get my engineering teams here immediately, the Admiral commanded. We will fix this quickly. Within an hour, the engineering bay was crowded with experts from across the coalition. Felkarian systems analysts set up their quantum computers, running complex diagnostic programs. Morthani technicians tore apart power conduits, checking every connection. Zephyrin computational specialists, beings made of living crystal, plugged directly into the ship's computer networks, searching for software errors. Daewon and Bomi watched from the side as the alien engineers worked with impressive speed and skill. They used technology that humans could barely understand. Holographic displays showed information in dimensions that human eyes could not quite process. Tools that looked like art made repairs that seemed like magic, but nothing worked. 2 hours passed. The temperature inside the ship began dropping. In the medical bay, doctors prepared to treat delegates who could not survive the changing conditions. Some species needed warmth like desert sun. Others required cold like frozen moons. As the environmental systems failed, there was no way to satisfy everyone's needs. The Velkarian analysts shook their heads. The quantum processors show no errors, yet they refuse all commands. The Morthani technicians could not explain what they found. The power cores are functioning perfectly, but the energy goes nowhere. The Zephyrin specialists disconnected from the computer networks, their crystalline bodies pulsing with frustrated colors. There is no virus, no corruption. The system simply will not respond. Admiral Thexkorian stood in the center of the chaos, his forearms crossed. For the first time since the crisis began, he looked uncertain. All around him, the greatest engineering minds in the coalition were failing. Commander Harin approached him quietly. Admiral, we have 36 hours before life support fails completely. Some delegates have less time than that. I am aware of the timeline, Commander. The Admiral's voice was heavy. Harin looked across the engineering bay to where Daewon and Bomi stood. The human captain was studying the chaos with quiet intensity. His young assistant was taking notes in an actual paper notebook, writing with an ancient ink pen. Admiral, Harin said slowly, perhaps we should consult the human engineers. Thexkorian turned to stare at her. The humans? Commander, we have the finest technical experts in the galaxy working on this problem. What could humans possibly add? I do not know, Harin admitted. But our finest experts are not succeeding. Perhaps a different perspective would help. The Admiral looked at the humans again. Daewon was now touching the wall panels, his ear pressed against the metal. Bomi was sketching something in her notebook. They looked completely out of place among the advanced technology and sophisticated experts. "Very well," Thexcorian said finally, "but I doubt they will find what our experts have missed." Harin walked over to Daewon. "Captain, I need your assessment of the situation." Daewon straightened up from the wall. "You want my assessment? Everyone here is looking for the wrong problem." "Explain," Harin ordered. Daewon pointed at the frantic activity around them. "All these experts, they are checking their own systems. The Velcarians check the processors. The Morthani check the power. The Zephyrin check the software. Everyone says their part works fine." "Yes, that is the mystery," Harin agreed. "Everything works individually, but together they fail." "That is not a mystery," Daewon said. "That is the problem. This ship was built by committee. Everyone added their best technology, but nobody made sure it all worked together." Harin's expression shifted. "You think this is an integration failure?" "I know it is," Daewon replied. "The systems are fighting each other, each one trying to fix what it thinks is wrong, but they all speak different languages. They are making everything worse." Bomi held up her notebook. "Look, Commander, I have been tracking the cascade. The environmental system failed first, so the power system tried to compensate. But it used protocols the environmental system did not understand. Then the propulsion system detected the power fluctuations and shut itself down for safety. Then the backup system saw everything failing and tried to reboot, but that just confused everything more." Harin studied the simple hand-drawn diagram. It showed the failure cascade in a way that made perfect sense, despite being drawn with primitive tools on paper. "Can you fix this?" Daewon and Bomi exchanged a look. "Maybe," Daewon said, "but you are not going to like how we do it." The engineering bay had become a strange mix of old and new. Holographic displays still floated in the air, showing system data in multiple dimensions, but now thick cables ran across the floor. Simple switches sat next to quantum processors. Handwritten labels stuck to panels that once had automatic identification. Daewon worked on the power distribution grid with Kextal watching every move. The Velcarian engineer had been raised to calculate everything before acting. Watching Daewon work without detailed plans felt uncomfortable, like watching someone walk blindfolded near a cliff edge. "How do you know which wire to connect?" Kextal asked as Daewon stripped insulation from a thick cable. "Experience," Daewon replied. "I have fixed thousands of ships. After a while, you learn to see patterns. But each ship is different. The patterns cannot be the same. The ships are different," Daewon agreed. "But the problems are usually similar. Power needs to flow. Systems need to communicate. When something breaks, you need to find another path. The specific technology does not matter as much as understanding the basic needs." Kextal processed this information. In Velcarian engineering school, students learned that technology advanced so quickly that old knowledge became useless. But Daewon suggested something different, that beneath all the advancement, certain fundamental truths remained constant. Across the bay, Bomi worked on the propulsion controls with 3 other engineers now helping her. She had just created a manual. Override for the main engines, a simple control panel with buttons and dials instead of the touch-sensitive holographic interface that had failed. A Morthani engineer examined her work with one of his 4 hands. "This is so basic. A child could operate this." "Exactly," Bomi said. "When systems fail, you want controls that anyone can use. Complicated controls need complicated systems to work. Simple controls work even when everything else is broken." The Morthani tilted his massive head. "We design for optimal performance. You design for worst-case scenarios. We design for survival," Bomi corrected gently. "Humans spent centuries in space before we had good technology. We learned to build things that keep working even when they should not. That knowledge does not become useless just because we have better tools now." 8 hours remained until life support failure. Commander Harin moved between workstations, coordinating the effort. She had begun to see the logic in the humans' approach. Each repair looked crude by itself, but together they formed a system that was becoming increasingly stable. The ship was no longer elegant, but it was starting to function. Admiral Thexcorian stood in the doorway, watching his flagship being transformed. Every modification hurt to see. This ship had been his pride, a symbol of coalition achievement. Now it looked like something held together with spare parts and hope. But he could not deny the results. Life support was stable. Power distribution was becoming reliable. The cascade of failures had stopped because the systems could no longer cascade. The humans had isolated them, giving each system only the connections it absolutely needed. "Admiral," Harin said, approaching him, "Captain Daewon believes we can restore propulsion within 6 hours. And then?" Thexcorian asked. "Then we can reach the nearest coalition station. The ship will not be fast or comfortable, but we will arrive safely." The Admiral nodded slowly. "I was wrong about the humans, Commander. I thought their methods were primitive because they had not advanced. I see now that they choose to maintain old knowledge on purpose. It is a different kind of wisdom." Daewon called out from across the bay. "Bomi, we are ready for the propulsion test. Get everyone clear of the engine coupling." Bomi checked that all engineers had moved to safe positions. The engine systems on a ship this size were powerful enough to be dangerous if they activated unexpectedly. She had installed new safety switches, but they were untested. "All clear," she confirmed. Daewon's hand hovered over the activation switch. This was a critical moment. If the propulsion system failed to respond or responded too violently, they might cause more damage. But they had no choice. Without propulsion, the ship was still dead, just dying more slowly. He pressed the switch. The entire ship shuddered. A deep vibration ran through every deck as the massive engines came to life. The sound was rough, nothing like the smooth hum they usually produced. But after 10 seconds, the vibration settled into a steady rhythm. Green lights appeared on the control panel. Not all green, some systems still showed yellow or red, but enough systems were functioning. "Propulsion online," Harin announced, reading her wrist device. "Power output at 63% of normal, but stable." A cheer went up from the assembled engineers. Species that usually maintained strict composure hugged each other or made joyful sounds. The impossible was happening. The flagship was coming back to life. Kextal approached Daewon, silver skin reflecting the green lights. "Captain, I must ask you something. When you make these repairs, do you truly not feel fear? You cannot predict the exact outcome, yet you proceed with confidence." Daewon smiled tiredly. "I feel fear every time. But fear is not a reason to stop. You calculate the risks as best you can. You use every bit of knowledge and experience you have, and then you act. Waiting for certainty often means waiting until it is too late." "That is illogical," Kextal said. "That is courage," Daewon replied. "Logic tells you what might happen. Courage lets you act anyway." Kextal considered this for a long moment. Felkarians were taught to eliminate uncertainty through calculation, but humans seemed to accept uncertainty as part of existence. They moved forward despite not knowing the outcome. It was strange. But watching the results, it was also effective. 6 hours remained until the original deadline. The team worked through exhaustion. Bomi's hands were covered in small burns from soldering. Daewon's gray hair was soaked with sweat, but they pushed forward. Navigation systems came online. Communications were restored. One by one, the critical systems returned to function, not perfect function. The navigation was less precise than before. The communications had more static. But everything worked well enough. The flagship could limp to safety. With 2 hours remaining, Daewon made the final connection. Every critical system was now operational through the new simplified network. He stood back, looking at the mess of wires and switches that had saved 3,000 lives. "Commander Harin, we are done," he said quietly. Harin ran a full diagnostic. The results were not impressive by coalition standards. The ship operated at reduced efficiency across all systems. The integration was crude. The response times were slow, but it worked. The Eternal Horizon was functional again. "Admiral Thexcorian," Harin said into her communicator. "The ship is operational. We can proceed to the coalition station." The Admiral's voice came back, heavy with emotion. "Understood, Commander. Inform Captain Daewon and his team that they have my deepest gratitude. They have performed a miracle." Daewon heard this through the open channel. He shook his head. "No miracle, Admiral. Just improvisation and stubbornness. Very human qualities." Bomi sat down on a toolbox, finally allowing herself to rest. Around her, engineers from a dozen species were examining the repairs, taking notes, asking questions. They wanted to understand. They wanted to learn these methods that had saved them all. A Zephyrin engineer, their crystalline body pulsing with curious blue light, approached Bomi. "How did you learn to work this way? What training gave you this knowledge?" Bomi picked up her grandfather's old toolkit. "This was given to me by someone who survived on ships when one broken part meant death." He taught me that tools are just metal and plastic. The real tool is how you think. You have to be willing to try things that might not work. You have to accept that good enough is sometimes better than perfect. The Zephyrin touched the old tools carefully. We have forgotten this in the Coalition. We have become so focused on advancement that we lost the foundation, the basic knowledge that keeps things working. You have not lost it, Bomi said. You just stopped using it. But you can learn again. We all can learn from each other. The flagship's engines hummed their rough song as the ship began moving through space again. It was not the smooth, silent glide of before, but it was movement. It was life. It was survival. And sometimes that was enough. Commander Harin stood before Admiral Thex Corian in the command center. Around them, holographic displays showed the dying systems of the eternal horizon. Red warnings flashed everywhere. The Admiral's forearms were crossed tightly across his massive chest. You want to give control to the humans? His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Commander, this is not a rational decision. Admiral, we have 22 hours remaining, Harin said firmly. Every expert we have cannot solve this problem. The humans see something we do not. We must try. Thex Corian looked at the displays again. Delegates were demanding rescue ships, but the nearest Coalition vessel was 3 days away. Some species aboard would not survive 3 days. Some would not survive 1 day. Very well, the Admiral said finally, but they will work under supervision. If their methods appear dangerous, we stop immediately. Harin found Daewon and Bomi still in the engineering bay, studying the ship's systems. The captain was making notes on a portable screen while his assistant measured something with an old metal ruler. Captain Daewon, the Admiral has authorized you to attempt a repair, Harin announced. What do you need? Daewon looked up. I need everyone else to stop working. All these experts, they are making it worse. Every time they try to fix something, it confuses the other systems more. A Zephyrin engineer nearby glowed an angry orange color. You want us to stop? We are trying to save this ship. I know you are trying, Daewon said carefully. But the ship cannot understand what you are doing. Each system speaks a different language. When you give commands, the systems hear noise. Harin raised one hand. Everyone, please leave the engineering bay. Give the humans space to work. The other engineers left slowly, many shaking their heads or making sounds of disapproval. A Velkarian analyst paused at the door. Commander, this is a mistake. Humans do not have the knowledge for this. Perhaps, Harin replied, but knowledge is not helping us now. When the bay was empty except for Harin, Daewon opened his old toolkit. Bomi did the same with her grandfather's tools. Harin stared at the simple instruments, wrenches, screwdrivers, wire strippers, things that looked hundreds of years old. You are going to fix the most advanced ship in the galaxy with those? Harin could not hide her doubt. No, Daewon said. We are going to fix it by making it less advanced. He explained his plan. The systems were failing because they were too sophisticated, too interconnected. Every part of the ship tried to talk to every other part, creating a web of communication that had become tangled. The solution was to simplify. Cut the connections that did not need to exist. Create manual overrides. Make the ship's brain smaller and slower but more stable. You want to lobotomize the eternal horizon? Harin's voice rose. This ship represents decades of Coalition engineering achievement. You want to reduce it to primitive function? I want everyone aboard to survive, Daewon replied. Sophisticated is worthless if it does not work. Right now, primitive function is better than perfect failure. Harin was silent for a long moment. Her logical mind struggled with the concept. Everything in Velkarian culture valued complexity and perfection. The idea of deliberately making something simpler felt wrong, but 3,000 lives depended on her decision. Proceed, she said quietly. Daewon and Bomi began their work. They started with the environmental systems, the most critical for immediate survival. Using diagnostic tools, they mapped out every connection, every protocol, every automatic response. Then they began cutting. Bomi physically disconnected the automated climate controls from the main computer network. She replaced complex sensor arrays with simple thermometers. She bypassed the quantum processors that tried to predict environmental needs and installed basic on-off switches. Daewon worked on the power distribution. The Morthani power cores were magnificent pieces of engineering, capable of adjusting output in microseconds to match changing demands. But that sensitivity had become a problem. The cores kept trying to compensate for the chaos around them, creating more chaos. He installed regulators, crude devices that limited how fast the power could change. He added circuit breakers that would physically disconnect systems before they could cascade into failure. He created bottlenecks on purpose, forcing the energy to flow slowly and predictably. Harren watched with growing horror and fascination. Everything the humans did violated engineering standards. They used wire that was thicker than necessary. They left gaps where computers could have eliminated empty space. They built in redundancies that sophisticated systems had eliminated as inefficient. "Why are you adding so much extra wire?" Harren asked as Bomi ran thick cables through spaces that already had data connections. "Because if one path fails, we need another," Bomi explained. "My grandfather always said that smart ships have backup plans, but wise ships have backup plans." "That is inefficient," Harren said. "That is survival," Bomi replied. Hours passed. The temperature aboard the ship continued dropping. In the medical bay, doctors had moved the most vulnerable delegates into emergency stasis pods. In the diplomatic quarters, arguments broke out about who should get priority for the limited rescue ships that might arrive. Too late. Admiral Thex Corian came to check on the progress. He stared at the tangle of wires and simple switches that now covered parts of his beautiful ship's engineering bay. His forearms trembled slightly. "This is barbaric," he whispered. "This is necessary," Day One said without stopping his work. "Admiral, I know this is hard to watch, but your ship was built to impress. We are rebuilding it to function." "It was functioning perfectly until it was not," Day One interrupted. "Perfect is fragile, Admiral. When perfect breaks, it breaks completely. We are making this ship imperfect on purpose. Imperfect can survive damage." The Admiral watched in silence as Bomi soldered a connection by hand. The joint was rough, visible, ugly, but it was solid. Outside the engineering bay, other Coalition engineers gathered at the windows. Some made jokes about human primitiveness. Others watched with quiet curiosity. A young Velcarian named Kextal pressed close to the glass, studying every move the humans made. "They work so differently," Kextal said to a Morthani colleague. "They do not calculate before they act. They are guessing," the Morthani replied with disgust. "This will fail," but Kextal was not so sure. There was something methodical about the humans' chaos. They worked quickly but not frantically. They made decisions without lengthy analysis, yet those decisions seemed logical. It was as if they carried the calculations in their minds instead of in computers. 12 hours remained until life support failure. Day One stood back from his work, his face covered in sweat. "Bomi, ready to test the environmental restart?" "Ready," she confirmed, her hands on a simple lever they had installed. It looked like something from an ancient factory, completely out of place among the smooth surfaces and holographic controls. Harren held her breath. "Now," Day One said. Bomi pulled the lever. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. Then a deep hum vibrated through the floor. The environmental systems activated, not smoothly or elegantly, but with rough mechanical certainty. Air began flowing through the vents. The temperature stabilization indicators turned from red to yellow. It was working. Harren checked her wrist device. "Temperature is stabilizing. Oxygen levels are rising. Captain Day One, you have done it." "We have done part of it," Day One corrected. "Environmental is just the first system. We still need to fix power distribution, propulsion, navigation, and communications. And we have 12 hours to do it." "Then we should not waste time," Bomi said, already moving to the next section. Outside the windows, the watching engineers had gone quiet. The jokes had stopped. What they witnessed made no sense by any theory they knew, yet it was undeniably working. Kextal turned to the Morthani colleague. "Perhaps we should offer to help." "Help with what?" "We do not understand what they are doing." "Then perhaps we should learn," Kextal said quietly. The Velcarian entered the engineering bay. Day One looked up, expecting another argument or complaint. But Kextal simply bowed in the Velcarian manner of respect. "Captain Day One, I wish to assist. Please teach me your methods." Day One studied the young engineer, then nodded. "Grab that toolbox. We will show you how humans fix impossible problems." As Kextal joined the work, other engineers began trickling back into the bay. Not to criticize or supervise, but to learn. The humans' methods were strange and seemed primitive, but results were impossible to deny. If these crude repairs could save the flagship, then perhaps there was wisdom in simplicity after all.